Dude, it's unlocked,
Santos says, pushing up the window of the old Victorian-style house.
Who leaves their windows unlocked if they have anything of value inside?
I ask, looking down the side of the house toward the dark street.
Idiots,
Santos says, climbing through the window.
I'm telling you, man, this lady has all kinds of antiques we can sell. I have it on good authority.
Shaking my head, I climb through the window and into the house. It smells like old person, all musty and heavy and kind of sweet. I shut the window behind me and then follow Santos through the dark living room, dodging around velvet couches and side tables with doilies on them. He stops at the stairs to the second floor, tilting his head.
Did you hear that? No,
I whisper.
What was it? I swear I heard someone talking,
he says.
Maybe the old lady's awake. Fine, so let's come back later. Hell no, man. If she gives us any I'll just shove her down the goddamn stairs.
Santos heads upstairs and I follow along, wincing at each and every creak of the stairs. We step through the first doorway on the left in the hallway. Jesus, I say, stepping back out. The room is filled with dolls. They're everywhere, on shelves, on the bed, on chairs and on the windowsill, and at a little table with a tea set arranged before them. They stare blankly in all directions, glassy eyes reflecting moonlight from the window. Santos swings his backpack off and puts it on the bed.
Come on, dude,
he says.
Grab the ones that look old. They're worth the most, I bet. This is what we came here for? Dolls? Yeah, man. How are we going to sell them? I have a guy,
Santos says.
You have a doll guy? Yeah, bro, just hurry up.
As I step into the room, chills running up and down my spine, I swing my own mostly empty backpack off and set it down on the bed. Turning, I let my gaze drag across the dolls, looking for the oldest ones. My eye catches on one sitting on the bed. It's a doll with shiny red curls falling around her porcelain face, which wears an expression of surprised worry. The eyes are glass or marble, green and glinting. As I reach out to grab her, I'm only half aware I'm doing it. I pick her up and bring her closer to my face, staring into her eyes. My focus narrows, and it's as if I'm seeing nothing but this doll, mesmerized by her strangely real eyes. I'm vaguely aware of a commotion between the foot of the bed and the window, but I pay no mind, not as long as I have Samantha to keep me company. Yeah, Samantha, I say, as though she just told me her name. But as the commotion in the room dies down, my connection with the doll fades, bringing me back to reality.
No, Samantha,
I plead with her.
Don't leave me, don't.
Realizing I don't hear Santos anymore, I look up from the doll. My gaze moves to the foot of the bed where Santos lies on his back, staring up at the ceiling. 8 dolls surround his head, each one of them shoving an arm deep down into his mouth, stretching his jaw wider than it should go and making his throat bulge. There's another 24 dolls around him, at his arms and legs, as though they're holding the limbs down. None of them move, though. For a second, I think Santos is playing a trick on me, but the way those doll arms are shoved into his mouth looks downright painful. And as I stare at him, I notice he's not breathing. Fear makes my limbs heavy and my thoughts fast as I turn to the bedroom door. An old woman stands in the doorway, a wretched expression on her face. Her yellow teeth are bared and her eyebrows tilt down as she peers out from under them. I realize she's grinning. It's anything but a happy grin. I back away, looking over at Samantha for help, only to find an expression on her face that mirrors the one the old lady wears. There's movement all around me, and I look down to see that I'm surrounded by dolls, and they all wear that same insane expression on their faces as they close in on me.
Hello? Mom?
The old Victorian-style house is completely dark as I get home from my job at the coffee shop. It's strange, because my mom's car is parked outside. I push the front door closed behind me, putting my keys away in my pocket before reaching for the light switch. Nothing, no lights.
Mom?
I call. It's a 3-story house, 4 if you count the cellar. Maybe she's up in the attic. Maybe she lost track of time. Or maybe she's down in the cellar, trying to get the lights back on. I never wanted to move here in the first place. I liked our old house. But my mom has a thing about Victorian fixer-uppers. and she's always wanted to do this. She'll take a year or so to fix it up and then flip it. Besides, I won't be living here much longer. At the end of summer, I'll be going off to college. Right now, I'm just trying to earn some extra money so I won't have to work during the first semester. Pulling out my phone, I turn the flashlight on and shine it around. Boxes are stacked everywhere in the huge living room. Our couch and chair are still coated in plastic wrap. Dropping my backpack, I head toward the cellar, opening the door to a gust of musty air.
Mom?
I call down. Nothing. I think about going down and looking around, but the notion sends a shiver up my spine. No, I'll check the rest of the house first. The kitchen is nearby. I find a half-eaten plate of pasta on the table. It's cold, like it's been sitting out for a while. The chair next to the table is lying on its back. A lump forms in my throat. What the hell happened in here? My mom was eating, and she got up in a hurry. But why? Did she get a call and have to go somewhere? But why wouldn't she take her car? With a mounting sense of dread, I search the rest of the first floor and then head up to the second. No one lived in the house for many years before my mom and I moved in just days ago now. And the place is certainly in a state of disrepair. Every level is drafty and every floor creaky. So as I move up the stairs, each step is accompanied by a creak. As I reach the second floor, the flashlight on my phone times out, plunging me into darkness. A whoosh of air rustles my clothing as though someone just rushed past me, inches away. A chorus of whispered voices sounds from all around me. I can't understand the words. I get my flashlight back on and the voices stop. I look all around. There's no one there. My fear is getting the better of me. Steeling myself, I quickly search the rest of the house, ignoring the tricks my mind plays on me. But I still find no evidence of my mother. And there's only one more place left to look. The cellar. At the top of the cellar stairs, I shine my flashlight down. I've just turned it off and back on so it doesn't time out again. I've been down there once before when we first moved in. I had to flip the breakers to help my mom figure out which ones were responsible for what portions of the house. Now I remember that creeping feeling I got while I was down there. I shrugged it off at the time. Now, all I want to do is run. But I can't. Not if there's a chance my mom is down there. So I step down onto the first stone step, and then the next. The stairs end a few feet from a stone wall, and the cellar opens up to the right. As I step off the last stone stair, I turn that way, shining the light into the space. My eye catches on the electrical panel, my heart jumping up into my throat. The panel has been torn apart. Wires stick out in all directions. Pieces of the black breakers litter the ground below.
Matthew?
My mom's voice is soft and almost apologetic, but why does it send a jolt of fear up my spine? I turn toward the sound, shining the light into the far side of the cellar. There's a narrow gap in the wall there, about 2 feet wide, that I don't remember being there before. Then I see the old chest of drawers that's been pushed to one side, revealing the gap my mom now stands in.
What are you doing down here in the dark, Mom?
She smiles sadly, looking pale.
Come here, Matthew.
A creak sounds from directly above me, drawing my attention.
Is someone else here?
I ask, still looking up. I jump as I look back down, seeing my mother now standing just a few feet away. She holds a hand up, blocking my flashlight beam from hitting her face.
Mom? Are you okay? I'm just so hungry, Matthew,
she says.
Hungry?
Yes, she says, stepping toward me.
I've never been so hungry.
Something moves in the corner of the basement, just beyond the edge of my flashlight's illumination. Even as I step away from my mother, I look over her shoulder at the movement. I suddenly can't breathe. My eyes are so wide I feel like they're going to pop out of my sockets. The human-sized creature is hanging upside down from the ceiling in the corner. It unwraps mottled white and leathery wings from around its body, revealing a humanoid structure. Its skin is hairless and the same white-gray as its wings. Its completely white eyes shoot open and fix on me just a second before it screeches, opening its mouth to reveal a set of savage fangs. In the blink of an eye, it's no longer hanging upside down. It's racing toward me, wings flapping and arms extending. I turn and run, vaulting up the steps. When I'm a mere 3 steps from the doorway, another one of those human bat things sweeps in front of the door, screeching at me. My phone's flashlight times out, just as the 3 of them converge on me in the stairwell. The building shook from an explosion. I had to reach out and steady myself on a table, cluttered with research equipment.
They're through the wall!
Bellamy shouted from over by the boarded-up windows. He was peering out through a small hole designed for this very purpose.
And they're using zombies strapped with explosives!
Sheena and I looked at each other over the research table.
It's the Reapers,
she said, although we were all thinking it.
We need to get out of here,
I said.
Right now, if they get you. They're here for the vaccine,
she said, heading over to the fridge where the few samples of the newly finished vaccine were. A vaccine that could end the hell we'd been living through for the past 5 years. But some people, like the leader of the Reapers, didn't want the world to change. He was ruthless and powerful, and he didn't want to give that power up.
How did they know?
I asked.
Who didn't show up today?
Sheena said. Of course.
Luther,
I said.
That son of a... Get down!
Bellamy shouted a second before the boarded-up windows exploded, sending me and Sheena flying. I smashed into a wall and came to rest in a pile, surrounded by shredded wood and broken glass. Scrambling over toward Sheena and the vaccine vials she'd been holding, I quickly saw that her left leg was badly broken. Shattered vials were all around. I couldn't see a single intact one. Sheena moved, looking up at me while the dust was still settling all around us. She smiled and opened her right fist, revealing a single intact vial.
Go,
she said, blood spilling out of her mouth.
Go now. Your notes,
I said.
Are they in your office?
Gunshots sounded from down the hall.
There's no time,
Sheena said.
Go.
I took the vial and shared a look with the brilliant scientist. Then I got to my feet and ran out into the hallway. Keeping the vial in my left hand, I pulled my pistol out of my holster with my right. When I got to the stairwell, I slammed through the door and came face to face with one of the Reapers. His face was scarred up, denoting him as a warrior. Not slowing, I barreled into him with my shoulder as he tried to get his rifle up. He slammed into the wall and fell down the short flight of stairs toward the first floor. I shot him twice as I made my way down. Then I stopped and grabbed his rifle, holstering my weapon and sticking the vial in my left pocket, hoping it wouldn't break. But if I died, all would be lost anyway. I had to take the chance. The rifle was a military M4, capable of fully automatic fire. I switched it from 3-round burst to full auto and moved down into the basement of the college research facility. There were maintenance tunnels under the buildings, leading all around the campus. Upstairs, another explosion rocked the building. As I ran through the tunnel toward the next building, I noticed I was bleeding. Looking down, I saw a piece of glass about the size of a cell phone from the old world. It was sticking out of my abdomen just above my belt line. Ignoring it, I hurried on. While we had fortified the research buildings of the campus as best we could, it wasn't where we stayed. We had a much more defensible place a few miles away. Somewhere that the leader of the Reapers, Killian, wouldn't dare attack. Not unless he wanted his troops decimated. We had a stash of bicycles stored outside a far building, just in case something like this happened. I made it to the building with no problems and stepped outside. I couldn't see anyone around, and all the bikes were there. As I stepped over to them, I heard a scuffling sound from behind me at the corner of the building. I half turned, seeing a gigantic man with a badly scarred face, wearing full tactical gear and body armor. He was pointing a pump shotgun at me.
Killian,
I said.
So predictable,
Killian said.
Did you not think Luther knew about these bikes? He told me everything.
Stupid. I should have known.
I don't have anything,
I said to him.
It was all destroyed when your people shot an RPG at the building.
Killian laughed.
You think that will keep me from killing you?
I shrugged. There was no way I could get my weapon up before he pulled the trigger. Even if I could, he was wearing body armor. Only a headshot would do. But then I saw some movement from behind him. A shambling figure came into view, about 15 yards beyond Killian.
You know the problem with using zombies as walking bombs?
I asked.
What the hell are you talking about?
The problem is they're unpredictable. You never know where they'll wander off to.
Some stupid last words,
Killian said, raising his shotgun to blow me away. His finger whitened on the trigger, but just before he fired, the zombie with the bomb strapped to its chest kicked a rock that went skittering across the ground. Without moving the shotgun, Killian looked over his shoulder. I moved quickly, stepping to the right, raising my M4. Killian fired his shotgun at me. I fired my M4, but not at Killian, who was covered with body armor. I shot at the zombie, at the bomb on its chest. It exploded about 10 yards behind him. I was thrown to the ground, but I sat up quickly and looked around. Killian was in pieces, lots of them. Wincing, I got to my feet and looked down at my injuries. His shotgun had been loaded with buckshot, and I'd taken several of the small balls in my left leg. But the wounds weren't my major concern. I didn't think they were life-threatening. I reached into the left pocket and felt for the vial. It was still intact, despite the holes through my pants from the buckshot. I sighed and limped over to the bikes. Pedaling would be a bitch, but it was well worth it. Killian was dead, and we had a vaccine. Things were looking up. The room in the boutique hotel was simple enough. It had a bed and a bathroom and a television. But best of all, it had a window looking out onto a pristine sandy beach and turquoise water. It wasn't like we'd be spending much time in the hotel anyway. Abby and I had all kinds of fun activities planned on the remote island, and we'd paid a small fortune for this vacation, so we were determined to make the most of it. But as we arrived at the 3-story hotel, we were feeling the effects of jet lag from flying halfway around the world, so our plan was to get some serious sleep.
I'm gonna take a shower,
Abby said when we settled in.
Ugh, please do,
I said from the bed, waving a hand in front of my nose. Abby smiled, but her eyes narrowed.
I was going to suggest we fool around once I got out, but I don't know about that anymore. I take it back, I
said, pleading. We both laughed, and then she went to take her shower. I flipped on the television. There was a popular superhero movie on, but it was dubbed in the local language. At least there were subtitles. Zoning out, I closed my eyes for a few minutes. But when the building started shaking, I jumped up from the bed, looking around in confusion. The television shorted out, along with the lights. I ran into the bathroom as the shaking continued. Abby was shouting, and the water suddenly shut off. Grabbing a towel, I ripped open the shower curtain and helped her out. Then we both crouched in the bathroom doorway. We had the shades open on a beautiful sunny afternoon, but something had happened to the sunlight. The room was totally dark. After about a minute, the shaking stopped and things settled. Still, we stayed in the doorway. Abby's blonde hair was still dripping as she clutched the ends of the towel to her chest.
Earthquake?
She asked.
Must have been,
I said. The room was still dark. I couldn't see anything.
Stay here.
I went over to the window, seeing nothing but darkness. Like a black blanket had been thrown over the window's exterior. I reached around on the nightstand for my phone. When I lit it up, it showed I had no service.
What the hell is happening?
I whispered.
Did you close the shades earlier?
Abby asked.
No,
Suddenly, the lights in the room came back on. The sound of water hitting the shower basin came from the bathroom. The television came back on, but there was only a blue screen, and the window remained dark. I swallowed hard and moved back over to Abby.
No service,
I said, showing her my phone. I helped her up, and she went to check her phone. Stepping to the door, I tried the knob. It moved, but I couldn't open the door. Then I remembered the deadbolt. I unlocked it and then tried again. The door didn't budge. So I leaned forward and peered out through the peephole. The hallway looked normal. There was no one out there. The door across from us was closed. Then, from the left, someone came into view, distorted by the fisheye lens. No, it was two people. A sliver of dread stabbed through me as the people, a man and a woman, walked right up to our door. As the man looked up, I jumped away from the peephole, producing a frightened grunt.
What's wrong?
Abby asked from further in the room.
It's us,
I said, not really believing the words myself. What? I shook my head, trying to come back to my senses. I stepped back to the peephole. The hall was empty again.
What did you see?
Abby said, coming up next to me, grabbing my hand.
I saw us in the hallway, walking up to the door, just like when we got here.
Abby shook her head, brows furrowed. Then she moved forward and looked for herself.
There's nothing there. You're right,
I said.
You're right. See if you can open the door.
I sat on the bed while Abby tried, to no avail, to open the door. I kept looking from my phone to the black window. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening. Abby tried to phone the front desk, but she didn't even get a dial tone on the landline. We were stuck.
I'm sure someone will come check on us soon. We can't be the only ones in the hotel,
Abby said. We tried our best to pretend like everything was okay. We even tried to sleep, but it was no use. Our phones still kept time, so we watched as the hours dropped away. There was still electricity, so we were able to charge our phones and computers, but we couldn't access the internet or call anyone. We couldn't communicate with the outside world. 24 hours passed and nothing happened. We banged on the door and the walls. We ate the few snacks we had, and we drank water out of the faucet. The blackness outside the window never changed. Every so often, I would try to open the door again. When I decided I tried to break it down, Abby talked me out of it. She was certain someone would be coming soon. I wasn't so sure. On the second night, Abby was snoozing lightly when I heard something from out in the hall. I jumped up and rushed to the peephole, looking out. The door across from us opened, and an Asian couple walked out, rolling their suitcases behind them and chatting in a language I couldn't understand. I banged on the door and screamed, waking Abby, but the couple made no sign that they even heard me. And by the time Abby got to the door, they were gone. I could tell she didn't believe me. After all, I was the only one who had seen anything out the peephole.
I'm telling you, there were people there. I heard them talking,
I said.
Fine, I believe you. Is that what you want to hear? I guess they were deaf, even though they were talking. You don't f***ing believe me!
I shouted.
Don't lie to me! Don't shout at me,
Abby said in a low voice.
Remember what Dr. Shelton said about yelling. Dr. Shelton! Don't you see that we're screwed here? If we don't get out of here, we're going to starve to death!
Abby stormed past me and into the bathroom, slamming the door. Another day passed. We didn't speak much. Our hunger and fear took up our thoughts and energy. We just laid on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. We kept the light on, unable to bear the pitch dark. Finally, sleep came to me, but it didn't last long.
Josh!
Abby called, jerking me awake.
Josh!
She was in the little hallway next to the bathroom. I stepped to the foot of the bed and saw the box, sitting just inside the door.
What the hell is that?
I asked.
Did you get the door open? No,
Abby said, almost crying.
It still won't open. The box was just sitting here when I came to use the bathroom.
I skirted the box, careful not to touch it. It looked like cardboard, but not quite. The texture was wrong, like it was slicker than cardboard, slightly shinier. After looking out the peephole and seeing nothing but the empty hallway, I tried the door. It still wouldn't open.
Come on!
I screamed, banging on the door. After a minute of this, I'd worn myself out.
Are you done?
Abby asked.
You really think that's going to help anything?
I ignored her and turned my attention to the box. It was closed, the two long flaps pressed together on top, but there was no tape holding them in place. And when I touched the top of the box, the two flaps opened. Working carefully, I opened the box and looked inside.
I think it's food,
I said. Abby, who'd been standing back with a blank look on her face, seemed to snap out of her daze.
Really?
Inside the box were small rectangular bars. They were the same color as the cardboard, but they had a different texture. I could smell them. They smelled like those all-natural granola bars you get for $5 a piece at health food stores. My stomach rumbled. I reached in and grabbed one, lifting and taking a bite out of it while Abby yelled for me to stop.
Are you kidding me?
She said,
You're just going to eat it? Just like that?
It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. I closed my eyes and made a small moan as I chewed.
What do you want me to do? Send it off to the lab to have it tested?
I said, but my heart wasn't in the fight. I scarfed the rest of the bar down and had to stop myself from eating another one. It's not like there wasn't plenty in the box. There was. Probably 48 or more of the things. But I wanted to wait to see if there were any ill effects before eating more. Abby made it about an hour, asking me how I felt every 5 minutes before she ate one. With some food in my stomach, I finally fell asleep for a little while. 2 more days passed. Even though we now had food to eat, it gave us little solace. The stress, combined with the close quarters, meant Abby and I were yelling at each other for what seemed like once every 2 hours. Finally, in the middle of another fight, I stormed to the bathroom and slammed the door, locking it. Abby came to the door and started tapping on it, egging me on. She wanted to keep fighting. So I turned on the shower and sat under the warm water, not even bothering to take off my clothes. I sat there for a long time. At some point, I turned off the water and took off my wet clothes. After drying off and hanging my clothes, I unlocked the door and headed out of the bathroom to find the hotel room door open. I froze, looking out the open door and into the hallway.
Abby?
No answer. Holding the towel around my waist with one hand, I moved into the room. It was empty. Abby was gone. I ran into the hallway, looking frantically left and right.
Abby!
The hallway lights were on, and I could see a window at the end of the hall to my right. It was pitch black on the other side of the glass, just like the window in our room. Running to the left, I rounded the corner toward the stairs and the elevator. No sign of Abby. I hit the elevator button, but nothing happened. It didn't light up, so I tried the door to the stairwell. It wouldn't budge. I ran back the other way, passing the room and stopping when I got to the window.
What the fuck?
I screamed, punching the window. A sharp pain shot through my hand, and I knew I'd broken something. The window remained unmarred. Clenching my teeth and gripping my right hand below the wrist with my left, I stumbled back to the room, tears streaming down my face. And as I came to the door, I noticed something on it. There was a small device fastened over the peephole, almost like a little version of those doorbell cameras people have. I couldn't remember if it was there when we came to the room, but as I looked around, I saw that every door had one. I went across the hall and banged on the door. There was no answer. I did the same with 3 other doors. Nothing. I turned back and went into my room, leaving the door open about halfway. I stepped behind it and looked through the peephole, and I saw the hallway as it would have been if the door had been closed. But it wasn't closed all the way. I should have seen the door jam and only half the hallway, but I didn't. Whatever the device was on the other side of the door, it was playing a recording of the hallway. As I was contemplating this, the sound of movement came from inside the room.
Abby?
I said, hair standing up on my neck. I crept past the bathroom and into the room. I could see the back of Abby's head just beyond the bed, as if she were sitting on the floor with her back against the bed. I rushed over toward her.
Abby, baby,
The words jammed in my throat as I saw my girlfriend. Her parts were all mixed up. Her mouth was on her forehead, her tongue hanging limply out. One of her eyes was on her left cheek. The other one was where her mouth should have been. Her nose had been turned, her nostrils pointing to the left instead of down. Her left leg had been swapped with her left arm. She looked up at me with confused eyes, then tried to get up. She managed to get to her right leg, but when she tried to walk, she stumbled into the window. I moved back, watching as her left leg twitched and worked where it came out of her t-shirt at her left shoulder. She kept trying to get up, her eyes rolled in desperation. My mouth wanted to work, but there was nothing to say. I was sure I'd gone insane. Back in the real world, my blubbering body was a vegetable. Maybe I'd been in an accident, severe head injury. As I backed toward the hall, I passed the television, which suddenly switched on. This time, there was an actual program on, instead of a blue screen. It was a news program, in English. There was an aerial view of a pristine beach and turquoise water, but the tranquility of the scene was in stark contrast to the mess of rebar and plumbing and wiring that stuck out of the ground where a building had once stood. The building I was in now. The hotel. Still no explanation for the mysterious disappearance of an entire hotel on this remote Pacific island. It has been 5 days since the structure simply vanished, leaving experts to scramble for explanations that don't involve extraterrestrials. The family members of those staying and working in the hotel say that... The words were drowned out by the blood rushing in my ears. Abby stumbled toward me, reaching out with her right hand as she balanced on her right leg. She grabbed my left hand and jammed it up to her throat. It took me a moment to realize she was asking me to kill her. I shook my head and yanked my hand away as panic closed in. Backing toward the door, my only thought was to run. But I couldn't go anywhere. There was no escape. And as I backed up to the doorway, I felt the strong, cold grip of hands with too many fingers around my arms and legs. Something slimy clamped around my face, keeping me from shouting out or seeing the culprits. I fought as they dragged me down the hallway, but it was no use. The observation portion of the experiment was over. Now, they were going to take me apart and put me back together. It was my turn. He's fast, and I can't move quick enough to dodge the slap. My head jerks sideways as my father's hand collides with the left side of my face. But this time, I keep to my feet. He releases a long, wordless wail as he brings his hand back, as if to hit me again. His brown eyes are brimming with tears above his bushy black beard.
Damn it, boy,
he says, voice raw with emotion.
Damn it, I told you.
I stand defiant next to the boarded up window. I managed to get one nail out before my father snuck up behind me. I thought he was asleep. I was wrong.
You gonna hit me again?
I shout.
Come on!
He jerks forward, grabbing the base of my neck with his large, calloused hands. I think he's going to throttle me at first, but he yanks me toward his chest, pulling me into a too tight hug.
What can I do to make you understand?
He whimpers.
Tell me what I can do.
Over his shoulder, I see my sister appear in the hall outside the den, drawn by the resounding slap. She runs up in her sock feet, short, brunette hair bouncing as she rushes into the room.
What happened?
She asks. Dad doesn't answer. He just shifts and pulls Amy in with one arm, hugging us both tight.
I know this is hard,
he says to us.
Hardest thing ever, really. But I need you two to understand that you can't leave. You can't. It's not safe out there.
It's the same story we've been told for the last 2 years, and it's getting old. I push away, slipping my head out of his arm.
I wasn't going to leave,
I say.
I just wanted to look. I just wanted to see the trees and the sun for a change.
Dad shakes his head, letting go of Amy.
That's how it starts,
he says.
First, you'll only want to look. Then you'll want to venture into the yard. Then you'll want to head into the woods. Best to just not start. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is.
It's been 2 years, Daddy,
Amy says.
Can't we just look out? Just for a few minutes? I mean, you get to go outside. Why can't we?
Dad shakes his head again, wiping tears away.
I know you're both at an age where staying cooped up in here seems like the worst thing possible. I remember being 17, but I can't imagine how hard this is on you both. I never had to go through anything like this when I was your age. But the fact is, you need to be mentally prepared to go out there. Because they'll try to trick you. They will. Who will?
I ask.
Them,
he says.
They're the ones out there now. There are no more people like you or me.
That's what you keep saying,
I say.
But how are we supposed to believe you if we haven't ever seen them?
This is not up for discussion. You're not ready. And if I find you trying to pry another board off a window or open a door, I'll be forced to institute a strict lockdown.
Stricter than this?
I say, nearly shouting. But my dad is already walking out of the room. A few moments later, he returns with a hammer and several nails. He repairs the damage I did and adds an extra nail to each side of the board covering the window.
It's about time to start dinner,
he says.
You two better get to it.
Amy and I share a look. Then we walk out of the den, heading for the kitchen.
I heard a plane again,
I tell her when we're out of earshot. Her eyes widen.
You did?
Smiling at her excitement. She's only a year younger than me, but she'll always be my baby sister.
Sure did. That's why I was trying to get the board off. I thought Dad was napping. I wish I could hear a plane.
Amy says.
Or anything, really. I thought I heard an engine too the other day.
I tell her.
But it might have been thunder. It was so distant, I couldn't tell.
We fall silent as we reach the kitchen. Dad spent a couple of hours outside today, harvesting vegetables from the garden and slaughtering a chicken for our next few meals. What I wouldn't give to go outside with him, even for just a few minutes. But no, he says I'm not ready, thinks I'm still just a kid. We start preparing dinner, working in silence. Dad comes through the kitchen with the hammer and heads down to his room on the first floor. When dinner is almost ready, I head downstairs to tell Dad. As I approach his room, I pass the back door, which is locked from the inside with a metal chain around two metal hasps, one fixed to the door and the other to the wall. Dad keeps the padlock key around his neck. The other door to the cabin is so boarded up that it would take me hours to get it open. As always, I check to see if the lock is securely fastened. It is. I notice Dad's door is closed, which is only the case when he's drinking, something that's been happening more and more recently. I don't know how much liquor he managed to stow away before we went into lockdown, but he must be getting low. Pausing outside his room, I press my ear to the door.
Every day they keep pushing me,
I hear him say.
and it's getting harder and harder for me to resist them. Sometimes I just want to give in, to let them do whatever they want. At least it would end the turmoil. I wouldn't have to feel like this anymore.
There's a pause, and I hear the sound of liquid gurgling from a bottle. It's my dad taking a swig of liquor. I knock on the door even as I turn the knob and walk in. Startled, my dad quickly puts the bottle of whiskey down beside the recliner he's sitting in. He has a framed photo of my mother in his left hand.
Dinner's about ready,
I say.
Okay,
He says, sniffling.
I'm coming.
We don't talk much through dinner. When we're done eating, Amy and I do the cleanup. Then she heads to her room just down the hall from mine on the second floor. I go to my room and collapse onto my bed. As I lie in my bed, staring at the board over my window with nails every 2 inches, I hear a strange murmuring from outside. At first, I think it's the wind, but it seems to get louder or closer, and I realize it's people. I can't hear what they're saying, but the conversation seems casual, judging by the tone. Sounds like a couple of girls walking by in the woods, chatting. I jump up from my bed and rush to Amy's room.
Did you hear that?
I ask. She sits up in her bed, setting her book aside.
Hear what? People.
I say.
Outside. I hear them talking. Really? Yes.
I say.
Just be quiet for a minute.
We stay still, listening. I even hold my breath, but I can't hear the people anymore.
I don't hear anything.
Amy says.
They must be gone. But they can't have made it far. If we can get out there. You're kidding.
Amy says.
How? You heard what Dad said? He's been drinking.
I tell her.
I bet I can get the key from around his neck.
Amy's eyes go wide as her mouth drops open. It's unthinkable.
You wouldn't. Why not?
I say.
Dad goes out there every couple of days. Why the hell can't we? If he comes back fine, then we can too.
Amy bites her lip, considering.
You really heard people? And a plane? I really did.
I say.
I mean, what if this is all just made up? All this stuff happened right after Mom died. What if it's completely normal out there?
Amy shakes her head.
You saw the news reports back then,
she says.
Something happened, even if they didn't know exactly what. Yeah, I know something happened.
I say.
But that was 2 years ago. What if everything is fine now? I mean, why else would there be planes flying around and people hiking through the woods? Maybe,
Amy says.
And why would it be safe for Dad to go out, but not us? Does that make any sense to you? No, I think Dad has just gone off the deep end. Since Mom died, he's terrified of losing us. So he's kept us cooped up in here, even though whatever happened is cured or solved or whatever.
Amy looks like she's coming around, but she's not quite there yet. So I push on.
Listen, Amy, I heard Dad talking to Mom's picture again tonight. He feels guilty. He was saying how he wanted us to just do whatever we want so he could stop feeling guilty. He said that?
I nod.
Yeah, in so many words.
Amy takes a deep breath.
Okay,
She says,
see if you can get the key. But if you get caught, I didn't know anything about it.
I smile.
Deal.
I can hear my dad snoring as I creep down the stairs. His door is open, as it usually is, because he likes to be able to hear if we start messing with the chain on the back door. As I get to his door, I look inside. He's passed out in the recliner next to his bed, my mom's picture in his lap, and I can see the padlock key on the leather strap around his neck. Moving closer, I stop and wait.
Dad?
I whisper. Nothing. He's out. Using just the tips of my fingers, I twist the necklace so I can see the metal clasp. I unhook the clasp and then pull the necklace off. My dad doesn't make a move. I head back over to the stairwell to find Amy there, her shoes on and my shoes in her hand. She gives them to me, and I put them on as quickly as I can. I'm shaking with excitement. She also has a flashlight. I probably would have forgotten about a flashlight in my excitement. Moving as slowly and as gently as possible, I undo the padlock and remove the chain, setting it down next to the doorway. Then I unlock the 2 deadbolts and the knob. Amy and I look at each other in the dimly lit hallway. We smile. The smell of pine trees and fresh earth overwhelms me as I open the door. Amy and I slip out into the darkness. I shut the door gently behind us. Amy clicks the flashlight on and shines it around. Our yard is fenced in, and there are several raised garden beds within the chain-link fencing. The chicken coop is on the other side of the cabin. We can hear the chickens clucking every so often. She turns the beam outward, shining at the pine trees around the property. There's nothing much to see, just trees. But it's still the thrill of a lifetime for me, being outside after so long. The sound of a young woman's laughter splits the air from off in the woods. Did you hear that? I ask Amy. She nods, smiling. When I look back out into the woods, I notice the glow of a fire illuminating the trees just over the low ridge. Suddenly, I can smell the fire on the wind. Let's go check it out, I say, heading toward the gate without waiting for an answer. Amy follows, lighting the way. As we approach the crest, we slow down, looking over. Sure enough, there are 3 teenage girls sitting around a campfire, joking and laughing. Amy and I look at each other with wide eyes. As we're about to discuss our next move, one of the girls calls out to us. Hey, don't be scared. Come join us. She's a very pretty girl. In fact, all of them are. I can't believe my luck. Okay, I say. I start forward, and Amy follows a few steps behind. All 3 faces are turned toward us, smiling and easygoing. I'm Jenny, the one who already spoke says. Do you guys live in that cabin down there? Yeah, I say. I'm Brandon, and this is Amy. Nice to meet you, Jared, Amy says. I turn to look at her. Jared? I think. What is she talking about? No! A scream cuts the air from behind us. My dad. Amy and I flinch, turning around at the same time to see Dad running toward us through the woods, his shotgun in hand. Get away! Get back! What? I say, turning back around to face the teenagers. Jenny, the nearest one, lunges at me. As her hands touch the skin of my neck, reality seems to rip before my eyes. No longer is there a pretty teenage girl in front of me. There's a creature with wide, deep-set eyes and a craggy, blackish-gray face. A crooked grin with cracked teeth sits on the bottom half of its face, under red slits for nostrils. Its tendril-like fingers wrap around my throat. I can feel something entering my skull, but I'm not sure if it's something physical or more of a psychological invasion. They'll try to trick you, my dad said earlier. His words repeat in my head as terror freezes my bones. After a moment, I feel a terrible, unending crack form in my mind. A world too awful to comprehend suddenly becomes my reality. I can feel billions of other minds locked in with mine, all half insane and gibbering, pleading for release. I can feel all their pain and their sorrow and their fear, and it's never ending. And I can feel them, the creatures, feeding on it. I understand them, suddenly. Time folds in on itself, and I can see them, taunting my father on the days he came outside to work in the garden or get eggs. I can see them taking the form of my mother, telling him things that only she could know. They tried to get him to come out into the woods, into their territory, but he resisted. Until now. Until I drew him out here. I'm vaguely aware of the sound of a shotgun going off. A creature screams. I notice out of the corner of my eye a creature pouncing on Amy, and I can feel it as her mind joins the fray, adding her darkness to the infinite turmoil. The shotgun fires again, and another creature screams, but it's not dead. They can't die. Not with violence, only starvation. My dad comes into view. I see him look from me to Amy and back as he pumps another shell into the chamber. Then he turns the barrel on himself. The shotgun fires, and then I'm pulled all the way out of reality and into hell. But before my world becomes nothing but agony, my last coherent thought is for my dad. At least he escaped this fate.
Where are you taking me?
My younger sister giggled as she looked out the car window at the woods.
I told you, it's a surprise. You'll see soon enough.
Her face got suddenly serious, and she peered at me so intently that I had to slow down a bit on the dirt road to gaze back at her.
Wait,
She said.
you're not taking me out to murder me, are you?
My mouth dropped open and my eyes went wide.
No.
We both fell into laughter. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I finally got myself under control, my gasps dying down. It was a good laugh with Serena. It felt like old times, better times. We lapsed into a comfortable silence as I steered the car down the narrow road, the headlights picking out little more than shapes from the trees. Then the structure came into view up ahead, the glowing lights of the towering mansion appearing through a gap in the foliage.
Wow,
Serena said.
I wonder who lives there. You're about to find out,
I said.
No way.
I nodded.
You actually know the person who lives in that house?
She asked. I nodded again.
I met him a couple of months ago. The first person I thought of was you, when he invited me up and I saw it the first time. I know how you love these old mansions. I definitely do. I just wish it was daytime. I can hardly see the architecture. And why all this secrecy? Why couldn't I tell Simon and the kids where I was going?
I rolled my eyes.
I didn't want your husband worrying and calling you every 5 minutes. He's such a baby.
My sister punched my arm and laughed.
Leave him alone. He's sweet. Just trust me,
I said.
There's more than just the house waiting. I promise.
10 minutes later, we pulled up to the unique mountainside mansion. There was a fountain in the middle of the circular driveway, red lights shining up from the water as it burbled away. After I parked, we got out of the car and marveled at the structure. There were 3 chimneys sticking up, and 2 peaked towers with arch-style windows. The roofs were all steeply pitched, giving the house itself the appearance of some especially brutal mountain range. Looking at my sister while she babbled on in architect speak, I had a moment of regret. I suddenly wanted to tell her that plans had changed before whisking her back down the mountain. With some effort, I shoved my regret deep down, knowing that what came next would absolutely be worth it. It would be worth anything. I just had to keep my nerve for a little longer. I knocked on the heavy and ornately carved wooden door and waited. The door opened, revealing Horace in all his pale and handsome glory. A tall man dressed in an immaculate black suit with a red tie, Horace smiled without showing his teeth as he took us in with lively eyes. His brown hair was pulled back into a bun, and his cheeks were clean-shaven.
Come in, Jackson. This must be your lovely sister, Serena.
We stepped inside as Serena shook Horace's hand and gushed about his house.
Thank you,
he said.
I spent many years perfecting the design.
He led us through the house, which was draped in finery and decorated in dark hues. He came to a metal door, which he opened before standing aside, gesturing for us to enter.
We're doing this now?
I asked, suddenly sweating.
Why wouldn't we?
Horace asked.
Doing what?
Serena said. She seemed to sense that something was off. Maybe it was the pitch dark room waiting for us.
Your brother has orchestrated a little surprise for you,
Horace said, smiling again without showing his teeth. Serena hesitated.
Please,
He said.
I'm sure you will quite like it.
Serena walked into the dark room. I paused and looked at Horace. The edge of his lip twitched as his eyes bore into me. Swallowing, I walked into the room. Horace stepped inside after us, swinging the door shut and removing any source of light. But it was only dark for a moment before the lights came on. I gasped, looking around the room at the collection of severed human heads preserved in glass cases filled with liquid.
What is this?
Serena asked, stepping close to me.
This is the one room I never showed your brother,
Horace said.
What's going on, Horace?
I asked.
I brought her here. Now you keep your promise. What?
Serena said.
What promise?
Horace finally smiled fully, revealing long and sharp bangs.
Yes. Why don't you tell her? It's nothing,
I said.
just a misunderstanding. Tell her!
Horace shouted, his voice a growl as he rushed to me and grabbed me by the neck. Half choking, I said,
I have a brain tumor, Serena. There's no cure. No cure but what Horace can give me.
Serena was back against the only wall without shelves. She was shaking.
What can he give you?
She asked.
Eternal life,
Horace said.
He was ready to trade you to me for eternal life.
No,
My sister said.
no, he wouldn't. You wouldn't.
I looked at her, willing her to see my side of it. But there was no understanding in her eyes. Only the cold realization that Horace was telling the truth.
All these people were trying to kill to attain immortality.
Horace said, gesturing at the heads.
They all wanted to deal with the devil.
They may not have gotten what they wanted.
But they got what they deserved.
He lifted me off the ground by my neck. I felt the cartilage in my throat breaking as his cold hand clamped down. I kicked my feet and punched at him, but it was as if he was made of stone. Horace took something from his jacket pocket and poured it into my grimacing mouth. The coppery taste left no doubt in my mind as to what it was, but I didn't know why.
Leave now and forget what you saw here,
Horace said. He dug into my pocket and retrieved the keys, tossing them to my sister. Serena rushed out of the room a moment before I felt Horace's other hand on my skull. He was digging into the flesh of my neck with claw-like fingers, pulling one way on my skull and the other on my body.
You know that old thing about vampires dying by decapitation?
He asked me.
Well, it's wrong. The head lives, you see. It can live forever.
The pain came to a crescendo as skin and muscle ripped, followed shortly by the wet cracking pop of my spine severing. My vision tilted, the room spinning as my head fell down to crack on the concrete floor. My vision darkened. I tumbled through death, a savage existence where endless hands pulled at my very essence, ripping my soul apart and leaving only tatters. I was sure years had passed when my vision came slowly back, and I saw Horace. He was lifting me up and dumping me into a jar on a shelf. Not all of me, though. I could see my body on the floor, fresh blood all around it. The blood he'd poured into my mouth was his blood. He'd done it. He'd followed through on his promise. He turned me into a vampire. And then he'd taken my head. I pull my girlfriend out of the way as the bus comes bouncing up over the sidewalk, smashing into the building we just exited 30 seconds ago. We end up lying on the sidewalk, the front wheel of the bus barely a foot away. Inside the bus, people are screaming. One woman jumps up and pounds on the door, but the bus driver isn't in any state to open it. There's a guy munching on his neck. Another woman with cloudy eyes and blood smeared all over her mouth appears behind the screaming woman at the door. Blood splatters the glass panels as teeth rip open skin and arteries. I look around at the city street, unable to comprehend what's happening, even though it has been going on for a good half an hour now. Abandoned cars clutter the street. Sons of gunfire come from all around. only overtaken by the screams and shouts of terrified people. A small group of people run down the opposite sidewalk, chased by 2 zombies. That's what they are, after all. There's no doubting it. They're zombies. The guy in the lead has a pistol, and, without looking, he aims it backward and fires. Only he doesn't shoot one of the zombies. He shoots a teenage girl that was running behind him. She falls to the ground, dead from the shot to the chest. Looking over his shoulder, he sees what he's done. He comes to a stop, staring in abject horror at the dead girl. The rest of his group keeps running, leaving him to his fate. A moment later, the 2 zombies crash into him, tackling him to the ground. One of them bites his neck, the other latches onto his arm. All this happens in the span of a few breaths. Maya and I scramble up off the ground and resume our run down the sidewalk. I'm sweating in the summer sun. My hand is slick as I grab hold of Maya. We turn a corner, just a block from the sporting goods store that is our destination. There's chaos here too. It's everywhere. A window in the building towering over us breaks, and we look up, seeing 2 bodies falling down. They land on top of an SUV, breaking the windows and denting the roof. The one who landed first is clearly dead, but the other one is a zombie. Although half its limbs are broken, it turns its head toward us, snapping its jaws and snarling as it tries to use its broken body to get to us. Apparently, they don't want dead flesh. Even newly dead people are of no interest. They want the living. We move fast, feet crunching on glass as we hurry down the sidewalk. The sporting goods store is on the corner. As we duck inside, the thrumming sound of a .50 caliber machine gun grows closer. We crouch down and look out the windows as a military Humvee goes tearing down the block. The soldier manning the .50 cal is screaming as he fires into a horde of zombies running after the vehicle. The massive bullets blow many of the zombies apart, severing heads and limbs. But there's just so many of them. The horde passes by, a parade of the walking dead, growling and shrieking and snapping their jaws. Once they are gone, Maya and I move into the wrecked store. Many people had the same idea, apparently, because the place has been ransacked. There are still people inside, gathering up items and looking at us warily. Still, we move through the clutter, picking up items that will be of use. There are some hiking backpacks left, and we grab them, using them to hold things like fire starters, pocket knives, and lengths of paracord. All the water filters and the camping meals have been cleaned out, and so have all the guns.
What about hatchets?
Maya asks as we look around for weapons.
Good idea,
I say, and we move through the store toward where I think hatchets will be. But as we pass a climbing section, I spot a lone ice axe hanging from a rack. I step into the aisle and grab the piece of equipment ice climbers use, thinking it will do nicely as a zombie killer. Behind me, Maya lets out a frightened squeal. I spin around and see a man with long, dark hair and wild eyes holding a rifle to my girlfriend's head.
Give me that thing,
the man says, gesturing at the ice axe.
You already have a gun,
I say, trying to keep my voice calm.
You won't be able to use both, and we have nothing.
I said give it to me.
Maya looks at me, pleading. I nod my head and shift to hold out the item to the man. There's a flash of quick movement, and the guy's head is yanked backward by his hair. He fires the gun as the zombies pull him to the ground, the bullet ending up somewhere in the ceiling. The man screams as the zombie clamps down on his nose. I know the noise will bring more zombies, so I step forward and slam the sharp end of the ice axe into the zombie's head. The thing goes stiff for a moment, then it goes limp. I step over and put my foot against the rifle, keeping the guy from using it as I wrench the axe out of the zombie's head. The guy is still screaming. Plus, he's been bitten. He's as good as dead. So I use the ice axe on him, and he goes quiet. The sounds of gunfire and shouting and cars crashing and the occasional explosion are still coming from outside. So I hope we won't have any zombies coming for us soon. Maybe they didn't hear the screaming thanks to all the noise. I hand the ice axe to a stunned Maya and grab the rifle and the guy's backpack. It contains bullets, some food, a couple of water filters, and a well-worn, stuffed bear. Tossing the bear out, I take the backpack. "We need to go. Out the back." As we move that way, a woman's scream pierces the air, much louder than the man's was. Maya and I turn, seeing a woman and a little girl standing nearby, staring at the dead man with the long hair. Suddenly, the bear makes sense. It must belong to the little girl.
Stop screaming!
I shout.
You killed him!
The woman screams.
You killed Jamie!
She reaches behind her back for something. She must have a pistol. I drop the backpack and rack the bolt on the rifle, ejecting the shell and loading another one. The woman brings a revolver out, and I have no time to aim the rifle. I shoot from the hip, hitting the woman in the face. She falls to the floor, blood splattering her daughter.
Let's move!
I say to Maya, picking up the backpack I dropped. My girlfriend looks at me like I'm insane.
We can't just leave her here!
I glance at the little girl, who looks at her dead parents for a long moment before her face screws up and she starts bawling. Maya steps toward her, but I stick the barrel of the rifle out, keeping her from moving.
We won't last an hour with her, I say. It's not happening. It's suicide.
The girl's bawling is getting louder. If the gunshots haven't already attracted zombies, the crying will soon.
We're not just leaving her,
Maya says again, shoving me and heading toward the girl. I quickly load another shell into the rifle. I take aim and I fire. The crying stops.
There,
I say.
problem solved. Now let's go, Maya.
Running footsteps come from the front of the store. Zombies coming fast. Maya looks at me with an expression I've never seen before. It's not hard to read, though. Disgust, shock, and maybe a little hate. But she hears the footsteps too. And as I move toward the back of the store, loading another bullet into the chamber, she follows me. She'll come around eventually. Her old way of thinking about the world will change. And when that happens, she'll thank me. I'm confident she'll come around. But if she doesn't, I would hate to have to kill her too. I awoke to the sound of tapping. I blinked, my eyes blurry. I tried to focus on my surroundings. I'm still here, I realized quickly, glancing around through the dark. I'm still in the internet cafe. I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms and rolling my shoulders, allowing myself a groan of discomfort. When I got here this evening, it was relatively busy. People were all around me, drinking their coffees and using the computers. Who in this day and age even needs to come to a place like this? I had wondered as I sat down for the first time. I don't own a computer myself, and my phone broke a few nights ago, so that's my excuse. I'd been using this place to send my emails. The World Wide Web, it's simply called. The words worldwide were in faded white neon lights, with web in a soft, flickering neon green light. Not sure what the copyright is on such a name, but I guess that's neither here nor there. The place was shrouded in darkness when I awoke. There was no one there but me.
The hell?
I muttered quietly.
Did they close up shop without even waking me?
The desks and tables around me disappeared into the shadows and the gloom, giving the main room the eerie illusion of infinity, stretching out into the void in all directions. And there it was again, that tapping. It was ever so slightly. It was too loud to be coming from the computers, and yet not loud enough for me to place its source.
Hello?
I called out into the gloom, but my voice was simply swallowed by the shadows. A shiver passed across me, and I decided that it was time to leave. I grabbed my belongings and stuffed them into my bag. I stood up, feeling the joints in my legs crack just a little.
I'm getting old,
I muttered to no one. I was about to make my way through the dark to the exit when the sound of the tapping caught my attention for a third time. I shot an anxious glance over my shoulder and paused at what I saw. A doorway, one I had not been previously aware of. Perhaps because it was unassuming or not obvious in the daylight. But at that moment, whilst the world was dipped in darkness, the edges of this doorway glowed bright. A soft, glowing green, and against my sense of better judgment, my curiosity was piqued. Should I? I thought to myself. I paused for a second to think. I'd clearly been shut in here by mistake and was unlikely to get such an opportunity as this one again. I'd take a quick peek through the doorway, just to see, and that would be that. I headed deeper into the building, towards the glowing green door. As I got closer, I started to feel vibrations through the floor. They grew more intense as I approached. I couldn't deny my anxiety, but there was excitement there too. After one final and very brief hesitation, I put my hand on the door and pushed it open, peering inside to take a look at its hidden secrets. Honestly, I expected a simple server room, one with glowing green lights or something. But this was not what I was prepared to see. It was a room far larger than the first, bathed in a dim green glow emanating from an enormous pile of clustered orbs in the room's center. They were piled up high above a collection of busted and broken tables. There were desks still intact in the room, each with their own computer atop it. The screens were switched on, all glowing green. I could have turned back here. I could have left this place behind, but I did not. Instead, I pushed forward. Unable to prevent the rush of curiosity, I stumbled forwards. I imagined telling my little brother all about this place. He loves mysterious and strange, secret places. I weaved my way between the desks, pausing as the same tapping sound as before started up again. Was it coming from the keyboards? I wondered, casting my gaze across the computers all around me. But none of them stirred. Swallowing, I made my way to the base of the great cluster of orbs. Each orb was of such a size that I doubted I'd be able to carry more than one at a time if I were so inclined. I pressed a finger against the closest, shivering with discomfort at the white-green strands that pulled away from its surface as I retracted my hand. I wiped it on my jeans and took a step back. I reached into my pocket for my phone, with the aim of taking a picture. And as I did so, my eye caught sight of a figure in the distance, a shadowed silhouette, seated silently at one of the computers. I cried out in alarm, dropping the phone on the floor with a clatter. My heart pounded as I stared at this mystery inhabitant.
Hello?
I called feebly, crouching carefully to grab my device. The sound of the tapping began again, fading in, then back out of focus. This was another chance for me to go. I could have fled back across the room and out through the doorway, but again, I did not. I approached the figure.
What are you doing in here?
I asked them, my sense of sight adjusting gradually as the seated figure became clearer through the shadows. When at last they were visible, I froze at once, staring wide-eyed at the person before me. She was a woman. All the color was drained from her skin. She was sitting rigidly at the desk, with her hands fixed on the keyboard.
Are you okay?
I tried to ask, but my voice was hoarse and barely came out above a whisper. The woman did not reply. A quick glance to her fingers showed me they were not moving at all. The green glow from the screen reflected off the surface of her eyes. Bulged veins, frozen in place, stood out on her neck and across her arms. With my throat death dry, I reached out for her, my hands shaking.
Can I help you?
I whispered, and in response, her eyes flickered suddenly over to mine. I cried out in horror and surprise and stumbled backwards into a desk with a loud thud. The woman stared at me, perhaps unable to do anything else. Her eyes were wide, and in them I saw only terror. I tried to make my escape. Scrambling away and crashing past the computers in my retreat, I passed by the great mountain of the pale green orbs, and just as I was approaching the doorway, I stopped. Just one last time. One last fateful time. I listened to the sound of that relentless tapping. It was louder this time, much louder. Louder, and directly above me. Slowly, I lifted my gaze to the shadows of the ceiling, and there in the darkness, my eyes met with eight green eyes. A splash of white-green saliva dripped from the creature's clicking, leaking fangs and onto my shirt. Struck with such a horror as I have never experienced before, I found myself unable to move. The nightmare on the ceiling above me, a great and monstrous spider, scuttled into position. And down came its stinger, sharp and quick. It thrusted into the side of my chest, and before I could react, I felt a deep and overwhelming heat begin to rush through me. Colors danced before my eyes, and I felt my joints stiffening. I staggered into a nearby desk and put my hand on the chair for balance, easing myself down into it for fear of falling to the floor and being unable to cushion my fall.
Please.
I managed to force out as my jaw locked into place, the muscles all across my bones tightening in unison. Waves of pain and nausea flooded through me. But there was nothing I could do. I had my chance, and it slipped by me. The spider made a hissing noise, then across the ceiling it went. Faster now. In the spider's excitement, it fell upon the woman. She was paralyzed and unable to fight back. And I, unable to look away, was forced to watch as she was devoured. I do not know how long she had been here. I do not know if there are others, but the monster is coming for me. That much is certain, and there is nothing I can do. I am barely able to type this message out on the computer in front of me. I am beginning to lose all feeling in my arms and legs. If you're receiving this message, I beg of you, please send help. It may be too late for me, but it could spare others. The line of cars ahead of me curves around and down toward the parking garage's exit, 2 floors below. I'm on the 3rd floor of the 5-story garage. It's the end of another long day. When I first started working here, I tried to duck out of the office early so I wouldn't have to wait 10 or 15 minutes just to get out of the poorly designed garage. But I quickly realized that it didn't matter what time I left. I would always get stuck, waiting as the line slowly dwindled down. Of course, if I wanted to stick around in the office until 7 or 8, I could get out of the garage in a matter of minutes, but that wasn't an option. So here I sit, once again. The skyscrapers outside are painted with the last rays of dull orange sunshine as the night expands into its fullness. The car ahead of me inches forward. I follow suit, moving no more than 2 feet. Cars, trucks, and SUVs choke the narrow aisle. Some poor suckers are sitting in their cars, still in their parking spots. They won't be able to get out for a long time. Not unless some good Samaritan stops and lets them back up. But it won't be me. Not today. There's some kind of commotion ahead, where the line of cars curves to the left, down the ramp to the 2nd level. I hear the faint squeal of tires over the podcast I have playing in my vehicle, followed by the muted crash of a fender bender.
Oh, great,
I say. Just what we need. Then there's another, louder crash, and more tires squealing on the concrete. A young man in an off-the-rack suit comes running around the corner, huffing from sprinting up the ramp. His eyes are wide, and he's looking at the people in the cars he passes, yelling something. I roll down my window as he approaches.
Run!
He screams.
Run!
Beyond him, I see several other people run around the corner. There are men and women, all dressed in business casual. One woman with glasses and a tangerine dress trips just as she's rounding the concrete pillar that blocks my view of the ramp. She lands with her upper body visible to me, and just as she's getting to her hands and knees, she's yanked backward so fast her glasses fly off. Bright lights flare from the car in front of me as the guy puts his sedan in reverse. Before I can react, he hits the gas and slams into the front of my Nissan Rogue. I look in my rearview mirror and see that the car behind me is right on my tail. I'm not going anywhere. Not in my vehicle, anyway. I put it in park, panic expanding in my chest like a terrible balloon. No more people are running up from the lower level, but I can hear screaming from down there. I grab my phone out of the cradle, open the door, and jump out. And I sprint back along the line of cars, heading toward the stairwell. If I can get to the ground, I can get help. But just as I reach the stairwell, which is next to the 2 elevators, I nearly crash into a balding guy who works in my office. He's coming up out of the stairwell.
Todd!
I say, looking into his eyes. I can't look for long. There's something about them, something haunting. And as I glance down, I see blood on his black shoes and brown pants. Fresh blood.
Don't go that way,
he says.
Why? What's happening?
I was down there, Jamie. I saw something.
What? What the hell is going on? Can't we get out that way?
Todd shakes his head.
It's on lockdown. The metal gates came down. The pedestrian doors are locked. There's no way out down there.
I run over to the nearest side of the parking garage and look down at the sidewalk below. As I'm watching, I see a man jump out from the floor below, screaming. He lands hard on his feet and curls into a roll. He comes up and sprints into the street without so much as a glance either way. The driver of a city bus hits her brakes, but it's too late. The man is lost from view as he's slammed to the ground and pulled under the bus. Eyes wide in disbelief, the bus driver looks around frantically. Her eyes land on the parking garage. She sees something there on the floor below me, and she screams. I can hear it even though her window is closed. She jams on the gas and the bus streaks away. Meanwhile, other traffic is stopped on the one-way road. People step out of their cars, cell phones to their ears as they call the police. Then something large and dark soars past overhead. I look up only to see a brief glimpse of what looks like a large shadow disappearing around a building. The sound of metal distorting and glass breaking draws my attention back into the garage. People are now screaming as they ditch their cars, heading past me up the ramp between the 3rd and 4th floors. I look back at the little alcove with the stairwell and elevators. It's jammed with people, pushing and shoving, trying to escape. A car comes flying into view like something out of the movies, tumbling through the air. It smashes into the alcove. I turn away on instinct before I see the carnage and run up the ramp to the 4th level. As I run, I call 911. I'm greeted with a recording telling me that all call takers are busy. Once again, I make it to the side of the structure and look over the concrete railing. Only this time, I'm looking down from the 4th level. Half of the cars on the street below look to have been abandoned, their doors left open, drivers nowhere in sight. As I watch, several cars try to work their way through the abandoned vehicles. They crash into each other at low speeds, reversing and hitting the gas again as they frantically try to leave. What the hell is happening? There's a whoosh sound from above me. I look up but see nothing. Just the last of the fading twilight and the darkening sky. Meanwhile, they're still screaming and crashing from below. I decide to run up to the top floor of the parking structure to try and see what's going on. Huffing, I reach the 5th level, which is open to the sky. Buildings of various sizes crowd the view. There's a group of people huddling in one corner, looking fearfully up at the sky. I glance up, trying to see what they're seeing. There's nothing, just a sky going from dark blue to black. But then I see something. It doesn't look like much more than a dark shadow, detaching itself from the side of a building, some 200 feet above. At first, I think it's a black tarp, the way it floats. But then it changes shape, like a bird narrowing its wings to dive bomb its prey. It streaks toward the group of people at the corner, its inky blackness morphing as it goes. The people see it coming. Some of them scream, others shout, others pray to God. The smart ones scatter, diving under nearby cars or simply sprinting in any random direction. My eyes are locked on the thing, my mind grappling, searching for some explanation, and coming up short. The shadow swoops down onto the remaining people. Tentacles made of the darkest night shoot down, grabbing a half dozen of them and yanking them off the ground. Then the shadow is airborne again, turning on giant wings that aren't really wings at all. The thing streaks toward me, the 6 screaming and pleading people hanging beneath it. Without thinking, I reach up and grab a woman by the leg, trying to save her, to rip her away from the thing. My feet leave the ground, and before I know it, I'm 15 feet in the air and quickly approaching the side of the parking garage. But my eyes are still locked on the thing. I watch as the tentacles pull the people up into the pool of midnight that is the creature's body. As they're pulled up, the tops of their heads touch the underside. Little tendrils of night creep down, shooting into their eyes, turning them pure white. The people stop screaming as they're pulled further in, their mouths lost to the black void. Realizing the same fate awaits me, I finally wrench my eyes away and look down past my feet. The cars below are the size of Hot Wheels. The parking garage is several hundred feet under and behind me. But I see that we're approaching a skyscraper. My hands are sweaty around the woman's ankle. My shoulders scream from holding my weight. The people are now up to their waists in the creature. Just a few more moments and I'll be sucked in too. I look toward the skyscraper. Yes, The creature's going to fly over it. My hands are slippery. Just another couple of moments. Just as I'm about to let go, the creature changes direction, skimming over the corner of the skyscraper. I have no choice. I let go and slam into the edge of the building, hooking my arms over the side. My feet scramble for purchase on the vertical exterior. With a loud grunt, I pull myself over and collapse onto the flat roof. On my back, I look up at the sky, breathing hard, processing what just happened. I can see a couple of bright stars coming out despite the city's light pollution. From far down below, I hear a symphony of sirens. Finally, I get up to my knees and look out to the west. From here, I can see far enough to spot the western horizon, where the sun is still setting. But what I see sends a spike of pure terror into my chest. The entire western horizon is crowded with black shadows. They undulate and swoop and dive, like massive predatory birds in a flock large enough to blot out the sun.
Holy
I say, slamming the door just a split second before bodies crash into it on the other side. Ezra appears from behind me with the metal bar we use as a barricade. He sets it across the door, into the brackets we installed on either side. It's a metal door, and the zombies will give up pretty soon, once they no longer hear us. Facing each other and breathing hard, Ezra and I smile, and then break into laughter.
That was close,
He says. Too close, I say. We were just on a supply run, but we'd been surprised by a small group of zombies when we were still a good quarter of a mile away from our building. Things just got out of hand from there. Before we knew it, we were surrounded. We had to jump onto the line of cars we used as barricades because, somehow, a bunch of zombies had gotten past them. So we were running on the tops of these cars, scrambling up onto the SUVs and vans, while these zombies were following us. Both Ezra and I fell at least once and had zombies biting the pads we wore around our legs and arms. But once we got to a place where the horde wasn't so thick, we jumped off the cars, using our weapons to bash any zombies that got close. Now, as we head toward the stairs, I place my hammer, coated with blood and brains, in its little slot by the door. Ezra does the same with his hatchet. And then we head upstairs to take off the pads and go through the supplies we gathered. We stop in the living room at the very top of the apartment. There are 2 couches set up in the room, facing each other. There's no electricity for television anymore, meaning we have to entertain each other. So we lounge on the couches and tell stories when we're not struggling to survive. I sit on the brown faux leather couch, while Ezra sits on the dark green one. We generally don't use guns when we're out, unless we absolutely have to because they make too much noise and attract tons of zombies. But we keep them on us just in case. I set my Sig Sauer pistol down on a little table next to my couch, and Ezra does the same with his Ruger. Even before the apocalypse, my brother and I spent a lot of time together. We've always been close, and people would often mistake us for twins. But we're not twins, we're a year apart. As I remove the pad on my left arm, I see something that sends my heart into overdrive. The padding has a tear in it, and there's blood coming from a minor wound underneath. I twist the pad so the tear isn't visible to my brother and glance up at him. He's removing the pads on his shins. He looks up at me.
What's up?
Nothing, I lie. I was just thinking about Mom and Dad. He nods sadly and goes back to his work. What am I doing? I think. I need to tell him. I'm going to turn in less than an hour. I have to tell him. We've always said that we'd let the other one do the job if we ever got bit. We made each other promise. I knew this day might come, but now that it's here, I can't seem to find the words to tell Ezra. Staring down at my lap, I'm overcome with sadness. It's a sadness so heavy and unrelenting that my thoughts jumble into a despair, black as night and sharp as a razor. Then I look up at Ezra and see that he's pointing his gun at me.
You're bit, aren't you?
He asks. I nod, tears spilling down my unshaven cheeks.
God damn it,
He sighs.
Well, let's get this over with. Downstairs?
I nod again. Ezra keeps the gun pointed at me as I move to get up, but I catch a glimpse of red on my brother's shin. There's a crescent of bloody marks just above the top of his boot. Freezing where I am on the edge of the couch, I point a hand at the wound. Ezra leans down and looks at it, gun still pointed at me.
Son of a b****,
He says. I move to reach for my gun, just in case he turns before me, but Ezra stops me. He says.
Don't do it.
What do you mean, don't do it? You're bit too.
Maybe it's just a scrape. Maybe it's not actually a bite.
I can see the teeth marks, Ezra. It's a bite. I reach for my gun again, and Ezra fires his, shooting a hole in the couch, inches from me. Shouting in anger, I reach for and grab my gun. Ezra fires again, this time hitting me in the stomach. The impact of the bullet reverberating through my body with sickening force. I level my gun at him and fire, shooting my brother in the right arm, halfway between the elbow and shoulder.
What the f***?
He says, trying to raise his gun again, but his arm isn't working properly, and he can barely move his hand.
Don't do it,
I say. The pain suddenly comes in a wave, and I cry out, clutching my stomach with my free hand.
Oh God, it hurts.
Ezra reaches across and grabs his gun with his left hand, but before he can get it up, I fire again, hitting him in the chest. He goes limp and slumps down, the gun falling to the floor. The pain in my stomach intensifies, and it's all I can do to stay conscious. But it doesn't work for long. Darkness takes me, and I pass out. I have no idea how much time has passed when consciousness comes screaming back. I wake as the immense pain in my gut is joined by an awful pain in my neck. I open my eyes to see Ezra, now a zombie, ripping a chunk of flesh from my neck. Raising my gun, I shoot him in the head. He falls to the floor between the two couches. As I put the barrel to my head, something occurs to me. I should have changed by now from the first bite. I set the weapon down in my lap. I'm losing blood quickly from both my stomach wound and my neck. I don't have long. I adjust the pad on my left arm to get a better look at the bite, and I see a small sliver of glass that I didn't see before. It was hidden by the pad. I remove the pad and the piece of glass and look at the wound. It's a cut from a piece of glass from when I fell onto a car's back window. How did I not remember that? I smile. It's kind of funny, actually. Hilarious, really. It makes perfect sense that Ezra and I would go out this way, even if one of us didn't have to. It's 3:15 a.m. The front page of a newspaper filtered across the road, carelessly blown in the breeze. The sky was black and moonless, and the two men who crept across the street far below casted shadows thrown only by the flickering blue-green neon of a nearby sign. These two were the sole people on the street at this time, and they glanced this way and that before hiding themselves in the alcove of their target's entrance. The building. The Cyber Cafe. The Cyber Cafe was an old, disused wreck. It went by the name of The Banquet back when it was open, God knows when. It was a curious name for an internet cafe, but there was probably some long-forgotten reason behind it. The place had no visible security besides a simple metal grate across the window and a rusted old padlock on the door. It was chosen as the night's target by the two men because of the building's age and its potential for high-value stock left abandoned inside.
Come on, Axel, get it open,
hissed the man with a shading of red stubble across his lower jaw. Raph was his name.
Give me a goddamn second, man,
his compatriot replied, grunting as he cracked the padlock at last with a crunch and a shower of rusted metal. A wire was inserted into the final lock, the one embedded in the door itself, and a minute later the men were in. With a long, low creak, the door was pushed inwards, and as they had predicted, no alarm bells were sounded. Raph grinned and rubbed his hands together, leading the way into the abandoned building. The place was thick with dust. Broken desk chairs lay heaped in the corners, and the desks themselves stood scattered clumsily across the entry room, as if they had been pushed to the side and just left there, no one ever bothering to return them to their original positions. A faded poster that hung on the wall advised its readers on the importance of staying safe online, and featured an array of cartoon children in colorful outfits, all using computers. In the darkness and the gloom, however, these children appeared unsettling. Their eyes were just a little too wide, their smiles ingenuine, and none of the characters on the posters seemed to be looking at their computers. Every one of them stared out, watching over the inhabitants of the room. And in that particular moment, the inhabitants were Axel and Raph. Both men shivered in discomfort, though neither admitted their reaction to one another.
There's nothing good in here, bro,
said Axel, running a finger across the surface of one of the empty desks and flicking away the grime.
You just don't know good loot when you see it,
Raph replied with a murmur.
Check the cupboards for parts. Anything metal, circuits, screens, we'll take the lot. Get them in the bag, and if there's more, we'll use the van. There's a couple of doors back there,
Axel said with a nod, gesturing further back into the shadows of the cafe.
Storage, probably. Alright, I'll go and check it.
Raph eased his way through the room and through one of the doors at the back, well away from the meager blue light that spilled in from the street. What he saw there surprised him.
Jesus! Hey, Axel! Yeah? Come check it. Forget the parts, bro. We've hit the jackpot here.
Axel followed on behind, and together the two men stepped into the room, awestruck. This second room was far longer than the first, and it was illuminated with a sole, quietly buzzing beam in the ceiling. The beam was once one of many, a dozen or more by the looks of it, but it was now the last light source remaining, and its brothers had long since gone dark. It revealed to the men the sickly blue-yellow patterns across the wall, like something straight out of the 90s, and it showcased the rows upon rows of computers, stretching away into the shadows before them. The computers were not particularly new. They didn't look like models from the past decade, but still, they were undamaged and would make decent stock. Very decent stock indeed.
Just look at all this. Why the hell would these get left behind, do you think?
Axel asked, his footsteps echoing as he moved deeper into the room.
Who cares? They probably forgot all about them,
Raph replied, scratching the stubble across his chin.
This is great. How many can we grab then? We can fit a whole load into the van. More if we aren't too concerned about potential damage. We should try and keep them safe. They look in pretty good condition.
Axel crouched down and rubbed his hands across one of the computers, pressing and trying the buttons on the sides.
Yeah, you're right. We can always come back again tomorrow. Or hell, later tonight if we're quick enough.
Raph mused, but his train of thought was interrupted by a loud, sudden, high-pitched jingle, like the gradual beeping sound of a power-up noise compressed into a single second. Both men jumped back in surprise as the monitor Axel was playing with shined suddenly into life. Where once there was nothing but an old, dark screen, there was now a radiant blue background humming discordantly with the buzz of the overhead light.
What the?
Axel began, narrowing his eyes in uncertainty. He returned to the computer, tapped the screen with his finger a few times, making dull thunks against the glass. He gave the monitor a shake, and in response, an 8-bit image appeared upon the screen, accompanied by a quick error sound, like something you'd expect to hear on one of Windows's older systems. XP maybe, perhaps even 95. But the image in question was a very simple, pixelated smiley face. You know the kind. A circle, 2 soulless dots for eyes, and a long, inverted arch for a mouth, curved up along the cheeks. The smiley stared out at the men, and the men stared back. Heart beating fast, though not quite sure as to why, Raph spoke out first into the gloom.
The hell is that?
He murmured, barely above a whisper.
Couldn't say,
Axel replied in the same tone, eyes glued to the screen.
Should we turn it off? Damn right we're gonna turn it off. It's giving me the creeps. Just press the power button. Please don't,
came a crackly, distorted voice from the speakers. The line of the smiley's mouth began to glitch and ripple. Raph felt the blood drain from his body, and his composure cracked as it cooled. His throat dried up and he found himself unable to speak. Axel stared between them.
Did he just respond to you, Raph?
He asked, his voice wavering. Raph struggled for a voice.
It did. I swear it. I told you to turn it off, and the screen replied.
Please,
It said again, the speakers fizzing and crackling.
please don't.
Raph wanted to turn tail and run, to get the hell out of there, but Axel stepped closer.
Why not?
He asked, hands clenched at his sides. The pixels of the smiley jumped and flickered. The monitor hummed, and the blue of its light reflected like water in the men's eyes.
If you turn off the computer, I won't be able to invite you to the banquet.
The banquet?
Axel repeated.
What? What banquet?
You're both invited to the banquet. Please come and join us. There is plenty to go around.
Said the smiley. Raph reached out and grabbed the sleeve of his friend's jacket.
Let's go, man.
He muttered.
Let's just get the hell out.
Over to their left, another monitor flickered to life. That same rapid startup sound. That same blue screen. Another low hum to accompany the first. And then finally, another smiley. Glitching into life with the error noise, cutting through the room's tension like a sharpened blade.
Help us.
Said the face.
Help us.
The smile flickered briefly to a frown, and then back. After a pause, it spoke on.
Please, help us serve. There is so much to go around. We require your assistance.
A third monitor burst into life, way towards the back of the room. The startup sounds echoed between the walls, and the voice was deep and low.
Don't leave us alone down in the dark. A banquet is greater with guests. Greater with guests.
Whispers a fourth smiley, and then a fifth. All around, the startup sounds became louder and louder, deafening almost. A cacophony of glitching, beeping errors.
Greater with guests. The banquet is just downstairs. Greater with guests. Please, won't you join us? Come join us downstairs for the banquet. Greater with guests.
And at last the two men could take no more. Axel broke first, turning and making a break for the door. The spell over Raph was also snapped in this instant, and they barreled back through the open doorway and clattered and shoved their way through the main room, past the desks and back through the door and into the glare of the neon lights outside. They tore down the length of the street and clambered chaotically into their van, not bothering to take even a second to mask or to hide their presence there on that night. They drove, and they did not stop until they were miles and miles away. They contacted the authorities eventually. An unlikely turn of events for a pair in such a profession as they. But the police were called nonetheless, and the cyber cafe was duly explored. There were only 2 cops that went in at first, not really believing that they'd find anything. But that soon changed when they passed through the second door, when they ventured downstairs and discovered what lay beneath. What they found was a long, low table in a dark and blood-stained room, a table adorned with plate after plate of fetid, rotted food. And seated at this table, at regular intervals, were no less than 24 corpses, chained to their chairs and connected to the walls with wires protruding unnaturally from bumps in the skin, and their faces were carved and ruined with the marks of the smiley. A circle cut around the edge, deep into the skin. 2 deep, soulless dots for eyes, gaping holes, and a long, inverted arch through the mouth, curved up slick along the cheeks.
Please, won't you join us?
When I first heard the screams from the kitchen, I was sure it was a joke. If you've ever worked in a restaurant, you know how crazy things can get in the kitchen. People are always messing with each other, arguing, yelling, or just being really weird to make their coworkers laugh. After the screams, I looked up from my seat in the delivery driver pickup area and soon went back to messing around on my phone. It was late on a Friday night, and I was at a local chain restaurant waiting for a delivery order. I worked for at the time while I went through school. The dining area of the restaurant was pretty dead, with only 2 tables occupied, and the people at them were mostly just chatting and drinking. I was sitting near the kitchen in one of the 3 chairs next to the side entrance. I'd picked up from this restaurant many times before, so I knew the deal. Usually, there were 2 or 3 dashers waiting for food, but this night, it was just me. The scream had clearly come from the kitchen. It was a man's scream, I was pretty sure, but high-pitched. That was kind of why I thought it was a joke. I looked at the flimsy swinging doors to the kitchen on my left, but didn't see anything. That was when I put my attention back on my phone. Then the sound of raised voices came from the kitchen. It sounded like people were getting riled up back there. I looked out into the dining area, front of house, they call it, and saw the people at the tables looking back toward the kitchen, even though they couldn't see the doors from where they were. When I turned my head the other way, I saw movement through the little square windows on the kitchen doors. It looked like two people moved past the doors quickly, but it was hard to tell. It was really just a blur. Then I heard a man shout, "No!" There was a couple of inches of clearance at the bottom of the doors, and I could see shadows moving through the crack, as though someone was moving back and forth, shaking violently. After a moment, the shadows stopped moving, and there was a thud. There was movement, and I looked up at the window in the left-hand door, seeing a face staring out at me. I immediately knew something was wrong with the guy. His eyes were too wide, and he had a massive grin on his face, but his teeth weren't white. They were red with blood. His skin was bright pink and bubbly. I thought at first that he was wearing a mask, but then I realized he'd suffered third-degree burns all over his face. I sat there petrified as the guy stared at me. I don't know how much time passed, but it seemed like a full minute. When I was sure he was going to push through the door and come toward me, he suddenly looked down at his feet. I followed his gaze, peering at the crack between the bottom of the door and the kitchen's white tile floor, and I saw what he was looking at. There was an expanding pool of blood there, and it had gotten on his shoes. He sidestepped over to the other window and started staring at me again for a few seconds before he shrieked, making me jump. I ran over to the people in the dining area, waving my arms.
Get out of here!
I said.
We gotta go!
The people were confused at first, but as I got closer, their faces contorted with fear.
Run!
One man shouted, pointing over my shoulder. Turning, I saw the man with the burned face just 2 steps behind me, a huge, bloody knife held in one fist. He sliced out at me with the knife, which I barely dodged by jerking my upper body back. As I scrambled away from him, backpedaling, I tripped over a chair and fell to the floor. The man with the knife loomed over me, still wearing that awful grin even though he must have been in tremendous pain. He raised the knife and swung it down at me. I could do nothing but put my hands up so he wouldn't cut my face. But before his blade reached me, a chair slammed into him, knocking the knife out of his hand and sending him stumbling back. One of the patrons had thrown it at him, and another one came and grabbed me up. We all ran out of the restaurant together, looking over our shoulders to see if the crazed employee would come out. But he didn't. The police showed up not long after that. One of the employees, who had run out the back of the restaurant when the guy went crazy, had called the cops. The police arrested the guy, but the 2 people he stabbed in the kitchen died from their wounds. I heard later that the man stuck his own face in a vat of boiling oil before stabbing the 2 guys in the kitchen. Apparently, there wasn't any sign that the guy was close to snapping. He wasn't getting fired. He had never acted crazy before. There hadn't even been a simple disagreement before it happened. He just grabbed a knife, stuck his face in a vat of hot oil, and then started killing his coworkers. He just snapped. Just like that. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and smash that like button to get notified every time I upload a new video. You can also check out some more of my animated horror stories right here.